I believe every person has a right to basic knowledge of how to optimize their mind, body, and spirit. Here, I bring to you influential individuals and ideas to help you live a more healthy, fulfilling life. I'm Julie Fouché, and I'd like to welcome you to Pursuing Health. Welcome back to Pursuing Health. This is episode 26, and I'll sit down with Functional Forum host James Maskell. A little bit about James before we get started. He's the founder and CEO of Revive Primary Care, which unites functional and integrative medicine practitioners on a digital education platform. He's also the host of the Functional Forum, which is the world's largest integrative medicine conference. It meets live in New York as well as in meetup groups around the world every month. And he hosts the Evolution of Medicine podcast, of which I'm a huge fan and frequent listener. So I was really excited to speak with James because he is truly leading the charge in bringing functional and integrative medicine to the forefront of chronic disease prevention and treatment. I'm a huge fan of the forum and his podcast, as I said, and I couldn't wait to ask him about how he got started with this work, his goal of supporting 100,000 micropractices around the world, his thoughts on the synergy of CrossFit affiliates and these functional and integrative micropractices, as well as some of his experience with the impact of community on health. So before we get started, a few quick reminders. First of all, if you're enjoying the podcast, please remember to head over to iTunes to subscribe and consider giving it a 5-star rating. Please also head to my website, juliefouché.com. There you can enter your email to stay in the loop with the podcast and everything else I'm doing in my bi-weekly newsletter. I'm also always looking for inspiring stories to share. So if you or someone you know has used lifestyle to overcome a serious health challenge, please send your story to me at info@juliefouché.com. I'll select some of these to share on future episodes. Finally, if you're interested in training with me, check out my program through Beyond the Whiteboard. This is the actual training that I do now, 5 days per week, 1 hour per day, scheduled out for you minute by minute from warm up to cool down. Now that the open is over, this is a great time to join us as we get back to the basics and focus on our form. For more info or to try the program out for yourself, please visit beyondthewhiteboard.com/Julie Fouché. So with that, let's get started here with episode number 26 of Pursuing Health featuring James Maskell. Welcome everyone back to Pursuing Health. I'm really excited to have James Maskell on today. It's an honor because his podcast is actually one of my favorite podcasts. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more today, James, and find out about how you started your whole functional forum, evolution of medicine, and everything that you're doing. So maybe you could start off and talk to us a little bit about that, how you got into doing what you do.
Well, yeah, it's great to be here with you, Julie, and thanks for the opportunity. This has actually been a lifelong thing for me, literally unintentionally at the beginning. I was born into this world. I was actually the OBGYN that took me C-section out of my mother was the founding member of the American Holistic Medical Association. And
wow.
My parents were involved in that, right from the beginning. And so, I had a naturopath and a chiropractor and a homeopath growing up rather than any regular doctors. So I didn't realize that was abnormal until I got to school and no one knew what a chiropractor was. And it was just it was a different world. So, this has been me since the beginning. I had a rebellious phase where I thought I need to be an investment banker, and I went in that direction. I had a degree in economics. I did focus quite a lot on health economics at that point, but I went into being an investment banker, and after about 6 months, I wasn't even on a desk yet. I was still in the graduate program that I got onto. I realized this wasn't ladder that I wanted to climb, and I wasn't in the industry that I wanted to play in, and I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and so I ended up leaving that. This is 11 years ago now, so 2005, and I moved to America. And my cousin had been involved in the spa industry and had brought the first natural skincare line to America, and had had a lot of great success with that. And so I went to go and work for him. So the first job that I had was working in this spa. Essentially, they started, he felt like the future of medicine, or the future of primary care, was going to be holistic naturopathic medicine and functional medicine. I guess he didn't use those words then, but
Mm-hmm.
integrated medicine delivered in a spa type of environment. And so I worked in this clinic, and for a year and a half I worked there. I was doing business development, but I was also sort of running the business. And it was an amazingly run practice. It's called the Spa on Green Street. It's in Gainesville, Georgia, and
Okay.
I got so much insight in that year and a half in how to run a successful practice. Then they purchased this supplement company that was sold to doctors. There's a small niche of supplement companies that you can only buy through doctors. You can't buy in stores.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started working for one of those companies, and so I started coming a lot more into contact with all kinds of holistic providers. And that's when I first started to find out about functional medicine, because I would go to the conferences and we'd have a booth, and I would start to just interact and see. And I can remember very clearly being in the Integrated Health Symposium in New York in 2009, and hearing Dr. Jeffrey Bland speaking, and on one hand being very excited because I felt for the first time here was a movement that had enough science to bring mainstream doctors across.
Mm-hmm.
The supplement company I was working for was probably a little bit left of functional medicine and bioenergetic medicine, and I realized that the only MDs that were a fit for that product were people that already knew functional medicine, because they'd already had an understanding of systems biology and so forth, and root cause resolution, and the body's innate healing potential. And so I just realized that functional medicine was going to be that bridge. And so I had a couple of other businesses. I had a practice development business where we'd coach practitioners on how to build a successful practice. I had a website company where we built websites for doctors in the space who wanted to build their practice. And all of that was good. We learned a lot, but none of it really scaled to the kind of impact that I wanted to have. And I went through those journeys. I went to this meetup on the west coast of America in LA. Dr. Hyla Cass, who's a functional psychiatrist, had this meetup for 30 years where doctors and, holistic doctors and practitioners would get together once a month. And I went to one of the meetups, and it was amazing. There was 150 people there, and I was like, oh, this is a really great community, and everyone seems to get a lot of value out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, man, they should have this in New York. And so that's when we came up with the idea for the Functional Forum. And, at about the same time, I realized, one of our strengths was the practice development. So we wanted to have clinical piece of it. We wanted to have practice development piece of it. And, we wanted to have a bit on health technology as well. So that was the genesis of the forum. We came up with the idea, I think, in the summer of 2013. The first episode was the first of the February 2014. And as of today, we've done 25 episodes, and now we're, getting some serious reach. Going back to Jeff Bland and listening to him, I realized he was a guy who had enough science to convince mainstream medicine that, about holism and start moving doctors this way.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also frustrated in the fact that there was only 500 doctors in the room, and every doctor needs to learn about this. And the Functional Forum, the real, intention of it was, one, how do we get this information out to more doctors? But two, how do we actually create something the doctors want to watch rather than something that they're forced to watch for CMEs? Because I think the
Right.
CME game is changing, and it's sort of trending to zero. There's an unlimited number of people that can use it, that are providing CMEs, and the cost is going to zero. So just using CMEs to get attention is the old world. And we wanted to actually develop something that would be really valuable to those doctors. And I think through the Functional Forum, we found a format that's interesting and fun, and also we've been able to get great speakers on there. And now it's got to a size where there's some real momentum, and it's sort of happening outside of what we're doing. And so it's an absolute pleasure to be doing every month.
Absolutely. Do you have an idea of how many people on average are tuning in to the Functional Forum now?
So typically in the first month, we reach about 10,000 physicians
Mm-hmm.
each month. And now it's one of the things that's hard to gauge is, each one of those people, each one of those 10,000 could be a group of 3 or 20 or
Right.
150.
Right.
So if 150 people, which we have 15 meetups now that are bigger than 100, and so you got more than 100 people sitting in a room watching the meetup, that counts as one.
Mhm.
So I think, somewhere into the range of 12 or 13,000 in the first month is about right. But then I would also put this caveat is that what's really exciting, and this is the power of the internet, is that there's this long tail.
Mhm.
So, we did one called Microbiome Madness, which was last March 2015 episode. I saw recently that in the last month, that episode had been seen by 3,000 more people. So the biggest conference you're seeing out there is, 2,000, and that's only once a year. The biggest IFM annual conference is like 1,200.
Mhm.
So to have an episode that we shot a year ago getting 3,000 more views in a month is really exciting because it shows the power of the internet to be able to sort of make this available to anyone and to sort of cut down the barriers to doctors finding out about functional medicine, which was the goal in the beginning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the goals that you talk about a lot for the functional forum is having 100,000 micro practices across, I guess, across the country or across the world. But can you talk a little bit about your vision for what those micro practices do and how they can have such an impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So this micro practice thing you're going to be hearing a lot more of in the next few years because this is what we're really going to build our whole structure on now. It's super exciting that functional medicine is coming into things like the Cleveland Clinic, and I know that you're sort of directly involved with that. But one of the things that I see is that first of all, developing these kind of centers in major medical institutions is an uphill struggle. There's a lot of personalities and ego involved, and so it can be slow, especially if you don't have the sort of top-down support that you have at the Cleveland Clinic.
Mm-hmm.
For years, integrated medicine centers were put into hospitals, but pretty marginalized. Put them, the bottom room, or in the Cleveland Clinic's case, 10 miles down the road, so that it's sort of out of sight, out of mind,
Right.
and it's not really a part of the overall structure. Whereas the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine is, which is really exciting. But I think there's a tremendous opportunity today for doctors to build their own integrative micro practices or functional micro practices. And the reason why we use the word micro practice is really because there's an opportunity more than ever today to build practices that have low overhead. And that's absolutely critical when you're starting a new business and you're an entrepreneur. You need to reduce overhead as much as possible so that, as you're developing your business, as you're learning, as you're going, you're not potentially putting yourself out of business by fighting a massive overhead every month.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with technology as it is today, with telemedicine and with, some of the other services that we found, the other technologies that we found for e-prescribed tools or, the Uber for phlebotomists, you don't need to have as much stuff in your practice. Functional medicine is sort of a low tech intervention where you're spending a lot of time speaking to people and having real relationships. And that doesn't take, you don't need as much physical space. And so what we've been encouraging, and this actually came way back in our fourth ever episode that we did. We had Mark Hyman, we had Andy Heyman, but we also had this guy called Dr. Jeffrey Glad, who's been a great friend of mine and has been a real inspiration, through this whole process. And, he's just, he set out the vision, really. He showed this picture of every farmer's market in America and showed the massive growth of farmers market in the last decade and was like, what if there was a micro practice wherever there was one of these farmers markets? And that really
Right.
got to me. And I thought, in the same way that in food, people are frustrated with, the levels bureaucracy and the levels of interruption between the farmer and packaging it, up labeling it, making it less healthy, all the things that happen, right?
Right.
It's the same thing in medicine where I think just like you want to go to the farmer's market and look the farmer in the eye and say, I want to eat your food. It's the same thing with doctor. You want to have that relationship, and you want to get all of the other players out of the way, the middlemen in the hospitals, the bureaucrats who are just trying to profit maximize, the insurance companies who are deciding what's real and what's not, the pharma companies who have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to maximize profits. There's all these people in the way, and I think what more people just want is a real relationship with a real human. And so we've been trying to set up systems and structures where that can happen really easily. And so with technology, with some of these new practice structures that we're seeing, there's a real opportunity for functional medicine doctors and other providers like nurse practitioners to be able to build their own practice,
Mm-hmm.
which is traditionally been really hard in the last 10 years because once you start taking insurance, you have to have a lot of people to process it, and it's a logistical nightmare.
Right.
And that's why you've seen more doctors going the other way, actually, which is selling their practice to hospital systems. And what we want to do is to sort of solve the bigger problem in medicine through physician entrepreneurship. Now, it's not only going to happen through that, and there are things like the Cleveland Clinic where they're now employing a lot of doctors, and I think that the majority of doctors actually just want to be an employee and do their work.
Mm-hmm.
But I also see that we'll get a bigger level of innovation, and we'll have the actual doctors themselves who have sort of heroically stepped out of regular medicine to practice this type of medicine and prove that it works, to be able to, set up a life for themselves that is healthy through this practice, because we live in a time where record numbers of doctors are committing suicide, record amount of doctors being burnt out, and
Mm-hmm.
that may or may not continue to happen in the new system if you're an employee, because you have little control over it. But Dr. Jeff Glad has worked 2.5 days a week for the last 5 years, and has a very strong, happy personal life, is very balanced. His clinic makes enough money to pay all of his staff and for him to live comfortably. And that's in Fort Wayne, Indiana, right? So if that can happen in Fort
Right.
Wayne, Indiana, that can happen in every zip code of America. And I think it's a great model to empower the physician to lead the healthcare revolution.
Absolutely. Definitely, as a medical student and someone in training, it is inspiring to see that and to see what is possible now. Because entering medical school, it was one of those things where you just constantly keep hearing, well, you're going to end up working for a big hospital system. It's impossible. All these family practices are closing. It's impossible to keep your doors open. And to see that that's really not the truth, and that you can actually practice in a much more meaningful way, the way that you want to, is really inspiring, I know, for myself and for other students coming up. But one of the things, as you were talking about that, I think that's a great segue into what's happening with CrossFit, because I think a lot of people listening are CrossFitters, and I think we've seen a similar movement in the fitness industry, where we were before seeing a lot of Globo gyms and huge corporations and people paying $10 a month memberships but never showing up to the gym. Whereas now a CrossFit affiliate, very low overhead, and it's a much smaller community where you develop that relationship with your trainer. You're actually spending a lot of time and focusing on improving your fitness. And so I think, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and I've had the opportunity to do CrossFit a lot. I see there's a strong community. I like the low overhead model. It is very similar in a lot of ways, and I think there's a natural synergy between functional medicine and CrossFit. And I've said a lot, through all of the trainings that I've done and at events, that like people who go to CrossFit are the best patients for functional medicine doctors, and is a ready-made community that is ready for any doctor that's wanting to do root cause resolution medicine, functional medicine in their community, as a great place to develop a relationship with. And I think one of the things we're seeing, that's a great opportunity, and we're also seeing that that could happen at scale. Where how many
Mm-hmm.
CrossFit boxes are there in America?
I'm not sure the exact number, but I know it's somewhere around 12 or 13,000. Well, worldwide.
Well, there's 12,000 out of 100,000.
Right. So it's getting
Yeah.
one step closer.
Yeah.
So that being said, how would maybe a member of a CrossFit affiliate or an affiliate owner contact someone in their area who's working in functional or integrative medicine, or try to facilitate that sort of partnership?
Well, look, the cool thing that we've done with the Functional Forum is set up a structure where you can create local connection. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if I was a CrossFit box owner right now, what I would do is I would go to meetup.functionalforum.com and have a regular Functional Forum meetup in my CrossFit box.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that way all you need is, is a TV or a projector, or you need some seats. Maybe you could do it in another place. Some of the CrossFit boxes that I've seen are in buildings that used to be offices, and so there's like a little office attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could get, if you now you set that up, now you start putting the word out, and you get 5, 10, 15, 20 practitioners coming to your meetup every month. Now they're referring people to the CrossFit, and you're having a good relationship. The benefit, the way that we set this up is that anyone could start a meetup in any zip code of America to bring practitioners together.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen sales reps do it. We've seen doctors do it. We've seen health coaches do it. We've seen other providers do it. We've seen all kinds of people do it because the benefit to doing it, the majority of the benefit to doing it falls on the person that starts it. There's a real value in taking initiative and doing it.
Right.
And so I would say if you have a business that could possibly be referred to by a health professional of all sorts, then that you're in a great position to sort of bring that group together. And hopefully I'm an inspiration for that because I set up this whole thing and I have no medical training, no medical background. I worked in this field for a number of years, and so I knew what was going on. But, I think, hopefully it sends a signal to the market that anyone can do this and there's real benefits in doing it. And what we're really trying to do is create community. And I think that CrossFit boxes are a really important part of a health community because it's a place where, one, people are doing healthy behaviors and not only doing those healthy behaviors, but learning other healthy behaviors through
Mm-hmm.
the sort of paleo infusion to CrossFit that, teaches people about how to eat right and eat low inflammatory foods and, has a lot of momentum in its own way. But also there's a real health benefit in creating community. And so there's a real synergy when you get the exercise, the food, and the community together. And I think these are the pods of health creation. I was asked recently whether I thought hospitals would be the center of the health creation movement that is very different from the disease care movement.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't think so. I mean, I really feel like it's going to be these kind of structures, more grassroots, where people locally take the incentive to build that. That are going to be centers of health creation and not hospitals, because hospitals are really not really set up for that in a certain way. You have no windows, you have fluorescent lighting, it's completely sterile, everyone hates their jobs. This is not the place where health is going to be created in my mind.
Right. I agree. And I think that it is a place where health is going to be created, is a place where people want to go, where they want to spend their time with each other and do things that are, positive for their health.
Absolutely.
And that kind of segueing from that point about community, we obviously in CrossFit realize the power of community and feel it very strongly. And I know that's something that you talk about a lot, and especially in the area of social genomics. And you recently had on your podcast Dr. George Slavich from UCLA Stress Lab, and that was one of my favorite episodes. But I was wondering if you could talk maybe a little bit more about what you've learned about the true power of community on health.
Absolutely. I've been interested in building community the whole way through this brand. It's a big part of the brand. When my book comes out in a couple of years, you'll realize, quite how relevant that was to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually sort of born into a community, and I grew up in a community early on. And so a lot of the things just sort of came naturally to me because this is the way that I was brought up, which is very different from, sort of the nuclear household
Right.
shift in the 60s and 70s, right, towards getting rid of the extended family, everyone living in their own little house. That was not my reality. Yeah, so we show up at the IFM conference last year, ready to shoot some video and make some episodes from that conference. And this guy, George Slavich, walks on and does this whole thing on human social genomics and rolls out the data
Mm-hmm.
and shows that for the first time, human social genomics is a completely new science. And the reason is because now it's cheap enough to do genomic data, so much so that you could track people and do it every 6 months and see the changes, right?
Right.
And so what they found is straight away is that is that social isolation and intentional breaking of social bonds is a massive influence on health, and whether that be through epigenetic changes, through there's a specific, now they see the relationship between the brain and immunity, and so you have a real impact on your immune system, through these kind of changes. So yeah, George Slavic breaks it all down with what they've been talking about, but I think it's one of the most interesting areas of medicine. And I guess the takeaway soundbite from it is that social isolation is a bigger driver of mortality and disease risk than nutrition and exercise and smoking, which have
Mm,
been sort of typically the biggest three that we've seen.
right.
So that's why you see people who are lonely. One stat he came up with, which is like, if let's say, there's a breaking of the social bond, like let's say a whole department gets fired from work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each person in that department has a two-time risk of depression, because they've been fired from work, and there's like a social bond that's been broken. Now if one person individually gets fired from work where now it was just them and it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
a whole group,
Mm-hmm.
that goes up to a 20-time risk of depression. So
Wow.
what you're seeing is when it's an individual person's risk that changes like that, and there's an intentional way in which a human bond is broken, then that can be serious. And I've seen it within my own family and personal experience. And
Mm-hmm.
so I see that it's such an important part of health. If you look at the blue zones, you can see
Oh
that,
yeah.
you're familiar with the blue zones research of the places in the earth which have the lowest levels of chronic disease. It's all about community. All of them have community in common. And so, I just think that's a really important thing to look at. And so what we try to do is, first of all, build these communities of providers with the functional forum, so getting
Mm-hmm.
providers together. And then what you're going to see us rolling out, and I've been talking about this at conferences for a while, but you'll start to see it being rolled out with more sophistication from us, is how practitioners can build communities around their practice.
Mm-hmm.
Because it makes sense to me that a CrossFit box or a functional medicine practice, or ideally some sort of hybrid of the two, which I know you're very excited about, could be the centers of health creation in every zip code of the country. And that's part of the master plan.
Absolutely. I am on board. Um, okay. Well, maybe you could talk about, since you've started this whole journey with your mission to create 100,000 micropractices and really flip primary care upside down. What are some of the most surprising or interesting things that you've learned along the way, or has there been anything that's really changed the way that you thought?
Well, it's a good question. Definitely, learn a lot about along the way. I think part of the reason why this business has worked has been that, you had my 10,000 hours in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first started, being a supplement rep, I put 100,000 miles on my car in 3 years, drove
Wow.
from every small town from Virginia to Maine, which was my territory, met hundreds of doctors and started to find out their problems and their solutions. I think one of the biggest things that has happened in the last few years has been this whole microbiome research
Mm.
that just came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
It was really awesome for me because I went to this conference called ACAM in 2012. That was the same year that the Human Microbiome Project results came out. And
Okay.
I had an opportunity to sit there and listen to Dr. Bob Roundtree, who's a pretty storied functional medicine doctor and winner of the Linus Pauling Award last year, talk about the microbiome. And at that moment in time, I knew more about the microbiome than 90% of physicians, or 95% of physicians,
Mm.
probably, because it was so new. And I just realized that this was going to, shake um, the foundations
Right.
of medical science. Now, I've been surprised on how slow that's been. I think the
Mm-hmm.
average physician probably like doesn't still know about it or the implications of it. I
Right.
mean, the fact that the gastroenterology profession missed the fact that there was 100 trillion microbes in their organ of specialty, is insane to me, and I find that truly unbelievable. But so I guess there's been a lot of things that have happened that that have been surprising to me. But I think the microbiome has been a topic that that has sort of come along at the right time to reshape. I mean, the microbiome research has really helped to push the cause of functional medicine, I would say, because
Absolutely.
functional medicine fits a lot more into the paradigm of microbiome medicine in a way that conventional medicine really can't or doesn't.
Absolutely. And I notice that is something that you, at least in the past few years when I've been in medical school, you hear a lot of talk about it and a lot of talk about the research, but the actual transition of putting that into practice and changing what's actually being done in practice is very slow to change.
Well, they say it takes 17 years, right, for new research to become,
Yeah.
regular clinical practice. And some of the research that I've seen suggests that in 17 years' time, so let's go back a few years, but let's say it came out in 2012, so 17 years would take us to 2029. We're going to have some serious chronic disease issues by
Yeah.
2029 on this planet, and particularly in America. So we don't really have time to waste. And part of the goal with the Functional Forum has been to accelerate this evolution of medicine
Hmm.
towards more doctors finding out about it, so that we could make some progress in that regard. Because yeah, the chronic disease thing is a big problem. I think America, just by having the problem for longer, because we invented McDonald's and Coke and the kind of stuff that gives
Yeah.
you chronic diseases. We've had the problem for longer, so we've been more able to find some of the solutions. And I, if I could look out for my next 10, 20 years, being involved in the rollout of functional medicine type offerings, in every country in the world, because really every industrialized nation is struggling with chronic disease. The numbers keep going up, the costs keep going up, the structures that are being created for acute disease that we now build our whole medical system around are proving not to be that effective for chronic disease. And so I think there's a great opportunity for functional medicine to really step forward into its rightful place, which is, as you said, um, a new iteration of primary care. And I think that's starting to happen. And we're very, very early. It's still, we're really in the early adopter phase,
Hmm.
but it's an idea that's time has come for sure.
Definitely. And I can definitely see that it is accelerating, and hopefully we'll get there far before 17 years from now.
Yep.
All right, I want to close with three questions I ask everyone on the podcast. So the first is three things that you do on a regular basis that you think have the biggest overall positive impact on your health.
That's a good question. So on, my health, I would say, well, the top three things. So I think the, when I feel healthy is if I have a continually a few days of drinking water consistently.
Hmm.
I feel like sometimes just a day goes by and I just haven't been conscious of it.
Hmm.
So I've set myself little reminders of that. I think being outside is been huge. I moved to Southern California, and one of the things that I found myself was that, when I was living in New York, I would literally come out of my house when it was dark, walk to the subway, go through the subway in the dark, come
Yep.
out into the thing, and go into my office that was dark. And I just wasn't, doing that. So I'd get outside as much as I can. So, that's changed my life completely. I don't think that I'm the right person to be speaking about nutritional habits, because I think I have a way to go with that end. But I think the my daughter and spending time with her has a definite improvement in my health. So I'd like to go for more of the psychosocial type of things than probably other guests that you have.
Absolutely. Well, maybe that can answer my second question would be one thing you wish you did or something that you think would have a big impact on your health, but you have a hard time implementing it. So maybe that would be
Yeah, look,
nutrition for you.
maybe nutrition. I mean, look, I eat very clean and
Hmm.
healthy, but like I also just if I could become really unconscious with things, so suddenly I'll just be like, not thinking, and suddenly I've eaten 5,000 calories, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's certainly something. But I definitely feel the one thing, like last summer when I was doing CrossFit like 3 or 4 times a week
Hmm.
for 2 months, I don't think I've ever felt better than that. And part of it was because I would go in the morning and I would come because I think the hardest thing for me is just keeping everything together with time. Running, being an entrepreneur, having a child, having a wife, having a family, being responsible for employees and that kind of thing. It can be very easy to just put yourself at the bottom of that list.
Absolutely.
Randy Zuckerberg and Mark Zuckerberg's sister has this quote about being an entrepreneur. I can't remember exactly the five, but she says there are five things in life. It's like family, um, family, self care, um, like what was it? Work, sex, eating well, whatever. There's
Hmm.
five of them, and you could choose three. So you can't do
Can't
all of
have all
them.
of them at
And
once.
yeah, exactly. And I feel like for me, the fitness one is the one that falls off.
Okay.
And when I was at a good speed with it, but that's the other thing about that. I was in a consistent place for 2 months, whereas
Right.
now, just in the last little while, I've moved to California. I've been traveling a lot, but if I can, get that together, that always makes me feel better. There's still work to do on that end.
Absolutely. The consistency makes a big difference, or having sort of a
Yep.
consistent routine, which I know is difficult to do when you're an entrepreneur. You have a lot of things going on. All right, last question is, what does a healthy life look like to you?
I think a healthy life provides the opportunity to add as much value as possible into the world, whether that be to the people that you spend time with and family
Hmm.
and your work. I get a lot of um, sort of inspiration and juice for my life by my work. I really enjoy what I do. I think there's a trend in the world happening right now, and I think it's a millennial trend for people to really want to be passionate about the work they do, and I think that that's really going to carry on, especially with automation and robots taking over. There's not going to be as many menial jobs, and so I think people finding their passion and finding ways to work in something that they love is going to become more and more of a trend. People have been talking about it for 20 years, but it's been very difficult for people to do and make a living. But I feel like with the democratization of the internet and the scale that's up, that's available through those kind of things,
Hmm.
there's more and more opportunity for people to do that. And one of the things that we're going to be doing, Julie, as you see what we're doing is rolling out, is creating structures where people can come into this industry and really start to make impact,
Hmm.
either in a clinical role, say like as a health coach supporting a doctor and helping to implement plans, but it might be as a sales rep, it might be as a community organizer, it might be as an activist,
Hmm.
and we want to find a role for everyone in this field because we do need all hands on deck if we're going to solve this problem. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who are stuck in a job they hate and would love to be a community organizer, say, but just can't pay the bills with it. And I
Right.
think that, as we start to build a peer-to-peer medical system and a medical system that works for chronic disease, there's going to be a lot of new jobs and opportunities. And we'd love to connect people with things that make them happy because I think that's going to have a big impact on health.
Absolutely. That I love that one. I think that might be my favorite response to that question I've heard thus far.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me. Before we go, where can people find you or learn more about what you're doing?
Functionalforum.com is our main site. Our new site for our business is Evolution of Medicine, which is goevomed.com. We should have a new rebranding of that coming out very soon. But yeah, one date I would just say for everyone to look forward to, which I'm going to be talking a lot about in the next 6 months, is the 12th of September. And on the 12th of
Hmm.
September, we're doing the Functional Forum live from the Cleveland Clinic. And what I want on that day is tens of thousands of new physicians and medical students watching that broadcast, seeing Toby Cosgrove say, "Hey, we're betting on functional medicine as the future of chronic disease management." Hearing from Mark Hyman releasing, the results of what they've been able to do in the clinic thus far, and sort of putting this, having a moment in time where people realize, okay, this is serious, this is happening, and for the shame that doctors and health providers that are not practicing like sort of standard of care medicine have felt, to be able to sort of step out of that shadow and to be stand into the light and say, look, no, this is the future of chronic disease management, and to be felt like as such. And I think the September the 12th is going to be a huge date for that, and I'm very excited to be bringing that to the world and So if that gets you excited, start your functional forum meetup group and get a group together and start building it over the summer. So by the time September comes, we'll be able to get as many people and especially as many physicians in front of that broadcast as possible. There's a big problem with physician suicide. There's a big problem with physician burnout. I really feel like this could solve, or at least help to solve, some of those products. Because one thing I would tell you, your problems, most functional medicine doctors that I know love their job. They love working with people. They're very passionate about what they do. It's reignited their passion for medicine in a lot of cases. And I think that's something that will have a whole slew of impactful benefits to everyone who participates.
Absolutely. Well, I am definitely looking forward to September 12th. I'm going to be there. It's on my calendar, and hopefully a lot of people listening will tune in as well.
Great.
So,
thank you, Julie.
Yes, thank you so much, and we will talk to you again soon. Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode. This conversation with James really fired me up for what's possible in the future. I hope you all could take something away, and maybe some of you will even consider looking up the local Functional Forum meetup in your area or starting one of your own. To make sure you never miss an episode and to receive exclusive content from me, head to my website, juliefouché.com, to subscribe to my email list. Also, don't forget to share your stories. If you or someone you know has used lifestyle to overcome a serious health challenge, please email me at info@juliefouché.com. I'll choose some of these inspiring stories to share here on the podcast in future episodes. Also, if you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe and consider giving the podcast a 5-star rating on iTunes. I always love hearing your feedback, so please continue to leave comments under this post on my website and share your thoughts on social media using the hashtag JFHealth. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time on Pursuing Health.